What is going on, guys? This is the Cry, and welcome back to SMITE Guides. Today we are talking about Aphrodite. Aphrodite is a healing mage that is in a very weird spot in Season 10 and has been in a very weird spot for quite some time now, ever since healing has been nerfed down into the ground to the point where it's really not that great. Anti-heal is just a little too strong and has been for a little while now. Definitely too strong in Season 10. For someone so focused around being a support healer that they don't do too well and they kind of get bullied and don't belong anywhere other than on the support lane. She can be played in the mid lane, but she's just not a good pick when it comes to other gods that are available for that play. She doesn't have a lot of range in general, and all of her abilities kind of try to funnel her into being that support mage person. We'll get into her abilities and why that is. We'll talk about her passive first. We'll run over here to the Odin bots and talk about how she is kind of funneled into that support area. So for her passive, she gets 4 magical and 4 physical protections per enemy and ally god that's within 70 feet of her. So really beneficial maybe towards late game when she's doing some 5v5 fights. Slightly beneficial whenever she's on, let's say, the support lane in the early game and she has 4 gods around her, maybe when she rotates to the mid lane later on, but just benefits from her passive when she's near multiple gods at one time. Going into her 1, which is also pretty supporty, she has a kiss that she blows, and this can go on to allied and enemy gods. The allied god it'll attach to, and they get some benefits from her other abilities when they are attached to her, as well as getting 70% of her mana regen granted to them. They also get a jealousy buff from anybody hit by the kiss that's an enemy god. For instance, if she hits this Odin, she will stun them. And then the ally that's attached to her will get 20% increased damage for 5 seconds, also known as jealousy. So a little weird support buffy ability there for her 1. And then her 2, which also happens to anybody attached to her, is a little area damage that she does around her with a knockback and a 25% stun, or 25% slow. As you'll see, it'll knock them back there. It does quite a bit of damage. It's her main bursty damage. But again, it happens to herself as well as the ally god that's attached to her. And then her 3 is a line attack out in front of her that does tick damage. She releases doves. Anybody attached to her will get healing during this time. Not a crazy amount of healing. Maybe, towards the late game it gets a little bit more, but by then anti-heal is so online that it really doesn't do too much. So really just the damage you're looking at here, which does, again, quite a bit of tick damage over time. Not enough to warrant her being picked as a main mage damage dealer in the mid lane. Her ultimate, again, very supporty, where she, for 2 seconds at max level, makes whoever's attached to her as well as herself immune to any type of damage, as well as clearing all CCs for that full duration of 2 seconds. It looks like this. It doesn't do any damage. Like I said, it just makes whoever she's attached to immune of any damage and also clearing any CCs during that time. We'll go over here and look at her full burst of damage if you are to build her in a way that might be able to clear someone out. Again, this is a bot that hasn't have any protections built onto them at all, so obviously a Guan Yu built out correctly probably wouldn't take nearly this much damage, but just so you can get an idea, it's really just her 2 and her 3 are her primary built of damage, which is why I tend to build Polynomicon on her, just so that she gets that extra burst from her basic after an ability cast. So she can do some damage, though again, I feel like there are better options for sure if you're looking at building her in a damage mindset. We'll go into how her support build would kind of look in a second, but I'll show you and go over her core build that I would go if you were trying to build her in the damagey lanes. If you were trying to go in a solo or a mid lane, definitely wouldn't take Aphrodite into the jungle, and obviously you don't play her in the carry lane either. So let's talk Aphrodite builds. We'll talk about probably her most common core build that I would build, and then we'll go into a build that you could substitute out for that. First off, I would build cooldowns on her just because she's so cooldown hungry. So Pendulum of Aegis for the 20% cooldowns is pretty important. Definitely Sands of Time for the early game for additional 10%, just because you need to be getting the damage off as much as possible, and she only has the 2 damaging abilities, and she's really unsafe to play in the mid lane. So if you're going damage, you're going to want to have as much cooldowns as possible so you can get in and out of fights and do as much damage as possible as quick as possible, just because she doesn't have the escape potential that most gods have. Then you're going to want to go into a Book of Thoth. This is for mana, as well as the additional power. For some additional damage, like I mentioned, Polynomicon is really good. This gives her the additional damage off of her basic, which is nice to have. After that, I would build something like Divine Ruin, because most of the time you're going to have an anti-heal problem. This also gives you the chain lightning like Odysseus's bow does, so really powerful item right now, built on most people. Most mages are going to go some type of lifesteal. You know the warriors are building, or the hunters are building Asi right now. Some of them are going double into Devos gloves, so you definitely going to have anti-heal for that in the late game. And then you're also, sometimes you see the Soul Eater built on your warriors, and Asi built on some of your junglers as well that are going attack speed based. So Divine Ruin is probably going to be needed in most kits, though sometimes you get lucky and you don't need it as much, especially if you have two people building some type of aura like Pestilence or Contagion for the late game. Then maybe not necessarily too much so, but in general you're going to build probably Divine Ruin. After that, you can go into a couple weird items. I feel like in this type of build structure, the last item I build is always going to be Rod of Tahuti, and then probably upgrade that into Perfected. And then other than that, this kind of option here is a flex. I'd say a Staff of Mirrodin is okay for like an oh crap moment where you need to ult, and then it gives you the increased 20% damage. You get the cooldowns to get you to 30%, as well as some magical penetration. Another good item here would be Chiron's Coin, but you're probably going to want to build that a little bit earlier. So maybe you go Chiron's Coin before Divine and build Divine late. Maybe you build it in Poly and build Poly late. But Chiron's Coin's an okay item right now. A lot of people are building it. You see it in a lot of meta builds. It gives you the increased penetration, 20% is huge, and then it also evolves at 8 stacks. You also get the heads or tail flip that gives you 7 HP 5 or 2% movement speed. So this is a good item as well. So you could build something like this and then go into Rod again, or you could sub out Staff of Mirrodin, which should be okay as well, since her ult doesn't really do any damage. It's more of a, okay, if I need to ult in order to make myself immune or to get out of a CC, then I know I have a 20% increased damage for 8 seconds. So if I want to try to get some damage off, at least then I have that increased. Another fun build to build on most power mages, and I think would work okay on her just because she needs some survivability, is something like these two items still. Just Book of Thoth is so powerful and kind of needs to build on almost every single mage, and she's very mana hungry in general. So Book of Thoth probably stays no matter what, but you can go into the lifesteal type power build that I like to build on a lot of mages, where you go into Bancroft's Talon and then go into Bancroft's Claw. And then you build Spear of the Maggots, which gives everyone around you, if you mark someone, 7.5% increased damage from them from all sources. And then you go into Typhon's Fang, which is going to take all that lifesteal you just built. It's going to take that lifesteal, double it, and turn it into power. So for instance, you have 42 lifesteal here. It's going to turn it to 84 and transfer that to power. So after Typhon's Fang, the last item is going to be a flex item. You could go Rod of Tahuti, but you're not going to upgrade it, obviously, because you have Bancroft's Claw. But the flat magical power of 135 plus the penetration percentage is nice, and then having the additional 25% magical power against people below 50% is always good. Pretty expensive item. You could go something like a Spear of Desolation. Spear of Desolation is good. It gives you 10% cooldowns to get you to the 30% threshold, gives you power and flat pen, as well as giving you the passive, which gives you 2 seconds of reduced cooldowns on all your non-ultimate abilities if you get a killer assist, and then 6 seconds on your ultimate ability for any killer assist. So Spear of Desolation is a good item here. I don't like building Chronos Pennant just because I feel like, yes, you get the 20% cooldown reduction, so it would cap you out, but it gives less power than most items you could build in this flex spot, and just in general, it's not that strong of an item compared to other items you could fill here to give up that 10% cooldowns. You could also build Soul Reaver if you're trying to get that additional burst. Your abilities deal an additional 2% of target's maximum health as magical damage. So if you're trying to do a little bit more there, this scales up on high damage towards the late game, or for anyone with high health, your warriors or your guardians would help out towards the end as well. So just a couple items you could sub into this type of build. Going into where you probably see her most if you're not building her power base is in the support lane. We'll talk about support items for her. So for the support lane, you can go either way here. I feel like just in general, you're probably going to go Sentinel's Gift into Sentinel's Embrace. You get the additional power, some sustain, and some MP5, which is good since she's so mana hungry. And then also getting the aura, which again, almost everyone builds Sentinel's Embrace right now, just because it gives the aura of protections, magical and physical, to everyone that's around you. So Sentinel's Embrace is a very strong item here. You could go Benevolence and kind of go down the healing lane with her if you'd like, because it has the passive heals for anyone near you. You're gaining that passive stacks, which when you're near an ally god will distribute as health if necessary. necessary. So benevolence is okay. You could go into compassion. They just made the new heroism as well, which basically just kind of helps out with crowd control and also giving some shield. But in general, you're probably going to go Sentinel's Embrace. After that, you're going to go into just your typical kind of strong build here. I wouldn't focus too heavily on any healing items, though I'll go into some of the stronger healing items that you could build on her. So after you build Sentinel's Embrace and you go into your secondary item, this is finally an item that's not Gauntlet that can be built here, especially on Aphrodite, is going to be Prophetic Cloak, because it gives you the cooldown reductions. You're going to want to start building those stacks early, so second item is a perfect place for it, where if you damage someone, depending on if they are magical or physical, you're going to get a stack for that, and then it stacks all the way up to a total of 15 and then evolves, so you'll get additional protections for magical and physical, as well as getting that benefit from the cooldown reduction. So Prophetic Cloak is very strong on her. Another strong item that you could build pretty early on is Stone of Binding. This is going to give you both protections that you're going to need as well as some health, and then anybody you hit with a crowd control ability is going to get a debuff on them, reducing their magical and physical protections, which is a very strong item right now, and you see built quite often. You're going to want to go into some anti-heal. As always, right now, the strongest anti-heal item is Contagion. You can build Pestilence if you're having trouble with some magical power. But in general, you're probably going to build Contagion just because you get the benefit of getting that aura, as well as some of that damage off until they kind of lower this a little bit more. It's been hit with quite a bit of nerf lately, but it's still very strong, so you're probably still going to build Contagion. After that, you can decide kind of these two last flex items. If you want to try to increase some attack speed for your hunter or your assassin, you can go into a Shogun's Kasari, which increase all attack speed for everybody across the board, as well as giving you some more cooldowns, which is again necessary for her. So Shogun's is a good item to build. And so for this last slot, since you've got double protections, physical, and then magical, you can go for another double protections, or if you're having trouble with someone specifically, you can switch out that specific damage type. But a very strong item that stacks really well on Aphrodite, especially with her passive, is Oni Hunter's Garb, which for each enemy god within 55 units of you, you gain a stack of 4% mitigation. So this also helps on top of her passive, which gives you additional protections, magical and physical protections based on how many gods are near you, allied and enemies. This stacks very well. It's also a very strong item right now. You see it built in solo lane all the time, but also works very well on your supporters. So this is a very strong baseline core build for Aphrodite in the support lane, and obviously there's some support items you could sub out here. Very strong items that I don't see built a lot, which should be, is Heartward Amulet. It's really good if you wanted to go into a strong physical protections build and then use Heartward Amulet to make up some of those magical protections, because you could build this out into your Amulet of the Stronghold, which gives you additional magical protections based on 15% of your physical protections. They get converted over into that. So you could go a strong physical protections build, and that will get converted over to some magical there on Heartward. So good item to build as well. You could go Sovereignty, which is really strong for your team. Gives them all physical protections. These are all aura items that'll help everyone around you, just in general benefit them as well. You could go Gauntlet early. You could build Gauntlet and Stone of Binding slot here right after Prophetic Cloak and still get yourself that health boost. You'll still finish the stacks on it. Still a strong item. You can go both of these. You don't have to choose one or the other. They're both very strong still. And other than that, I mean, if you're trying to really max out on your cooldowns, you could go Breastplate of Valor, though I feel like that's more of a solo item. You don't see it necessarily built too much over in the support lane, just because you're gonna need to go an anti-heal item. If you're gonna build an anti-heal item, I suggest Contagion, so you don't want to double up into the Breastplate of Valor. You really only want to go at least one single physical protection item, unless you're going into a very heavy forward physical protection build where you go into Heartward towards the late game. Then probably you could double up on this just to max out her cooldowns, but you would need to get rid of an item that doesn't give the cooldown reduction. You obviously don't want to double cap on that. So Shogun's or Prophetic Cloak, though I would never get rid of Prophetic Cloak because I think it's very strong right now. So I would hold on to that item. But in general, that's just a really good build on her. I guess you could mess around on like a Breastplate of Regrowth if you wanted to as well. Still gives the cooldowns, and then if you are healing yourself off of your 3, you get that additional movement speed, so that could help you get out. Just a couple side items to mention. There's 2 here that I want to talk about. If you're looking to increase if you're looking to do more with your healing, you could go Lotus Sickle, which increases magical and physical protections on anybody that's affected by your ability heals for a total of 5 seconds. So that's the kind of good item that gives you cooldown reductions to movement speed as well, which is nice. Something that you could build there if you're going like a heavy physical protection build. And then another one is Rod. Rod increases all your allies' heals by 20%. So anybody within 70 units of you gets healing increased by 20% on your team. So this kind of pairs up well with her as well, increasing your healing overall. But in general, anti-heal's so strong right now that in most cases, you're probably not going to focus on increasing your healing too much and just kind of focus on being a mainline support. That's why I feel like she's not the best for any spot right now, and there's just a lot of people that kind of play a little bit better than her. Well, not a little bit, but quite a bit better than her, so she's just kind of in a weird spot, like I said earlier. So that goes into Aphrodite. Again, I'm trying to get a guide out once a week. I am doing them in A to Z order. If you haven't noticed yet, if you're looking at which guide's going to be coming next, it's in A to Z order. So whoever follows Aphrodite, which I'm pretty sure is Apollo, will be the next guide, and so on and so forth down the alphabetical chain there. If you guys are enjoying the video, obviously leaving a like lets me know. Subscribing to the channel just shows support towards me and lets me know that I'm doing well and more people are wanting to watch. I hope you guys enjoyed the guide. This is the Bri Cry, and I'll see you guys in the next one.